What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this podcast. We help today's teams build the next generation of unicorns. This podcast is also now being sponsored by Allego. For all you sales leaders out there, have you ever absolutely nailed sales training or had a rep who killed a presentation that you wished you recorded to be seen later by new hires or other members of the team? Well, that's just one of the things that Allego can do. Not only does it allow you to record your best content for practice, collaboration, and feedback, but it gives you a way to organize all of your best content in one place so it's easily accessible to help improve sales performance for everyone. Email me, Webb, with 2 B's, at thejdavidgroup.com so I can personally introduce you to someone who will take great care of you. Now, my guest today is someone I've been eager to have on for a while. His name is Marcus Knight, a man of many titles, who is a seasoned go-to-market strategist and founder of Cultured Perspective. His vision at Cultured Perspective is to help companies implement an effective go-to-market strategy with an inherent equity strategy so that they can secure recurring revenue to meet business goals. Marcus is heavily involved in championing for underrepresented talent as he sits on multiple boards, including Sales for the Culture, which we will get into, which is frankly how we met, that not only bridges gaps between qualified, diverse talent and hiring companies, but creates community in the tech space. Most recently, Marcus was named VP of Go-to-Market at Shippium, a supply chain platform for e-commerce that helps companies deliver their orders fast, free, and on time. Marcus, welcome to Over Quota.
Thanks for having me, Jay. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I was worried. I mean, even with that opener, I feel like there's still many more things that we need to get into about, but at some point I had to stop and introduce you, you know?
It makes sense. Yeah, I do way too much. That's the
problem. So tell me a little bit more about some of the stuff you're doing, in particular, Cultured Perspective. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, I started Cultured Perspective, which is a revenue go-to-market consultancy, Black owned and operated. And the reason why that is important is because oftentimes the Black people don't get the chance to be, revenue leaders or to show their expertise in a revenue capacity. Besides being an individual contributor. So I decided to use Sales for the Culture as the means, the conduit into bringing people onto the platform, to Culture Perspective, and to be able to highlight their talents. So we have people that work at companies like Microsoft, Google, a long list of organizations, and basically they've been in sales for a long time and have a lot of experience. And so now it's their ability to get out and to consult with other organizations to potentially be their go-to-market leaders if they wanted to be.
Why do you think that's been such a challenge for so long in terms of Black folks being able to be out there as go-to-market leaders?
Opportunity. I mean, I just think that we always get overlooked for those type of roles, and we're so good at hitting quotas and doing the grunt work that a lot of companies won't take the chance in making us into those revenue leadership type roles. But honestly, whenever I see Black folks in those executive or leadership roles, they're really excelling on a major level.
And do you think that when you say opportunity, is it opportunity that where, let's say, for instance, somebody is able to get into a particular company and they aren't able to move up where they have enough of an impact? In other words, they're sort of stuck at the BDR level and sort of those kinds of things, they're not able to move up? Or is it even before that where they're not even given a chance to even enter into that realm, of technology? Yeah,
I think it's both. I'll start with the first, with being, people in the organization, say a BDR and AE, and still trying to work their way up. Oftentimes they're being overlooked by their counterparts, right? Like they are so good at their job at like closing deals, et cetera, bringing people to the next level, natural leaders, but oftentimes they are being overlooked by someone else that is in the same role and offered that position. And oftentimes it does come down to skin color.
Do you think that has to do with, is part of it advocacy? In other words, do you mentor that in terms of making sure folks are advocating for themselves? Or is it even bigger than that, where not only are they advocating for themselves, but it's just not, they just are getting overlooked for the simple fact that, they just don't think that people just don't think that they're qualified?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of both, because advocacy is one thing, but if you're an individual contributor trying to advocate for yourself in a company in a company that's like not designed for you to actually succeed, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes pretty challenging. So you need not only advocacy, but you need sponsorship from executives and people that are invested in your career in order to take you to the next level. And then the other piece to that is that, if you are trying to get into the organization as a BDR, let's say, there's so much red tape that I'm seeing from these tech organizations that make it almost impossible. Like requiring a college degree for a BDR role just doesn't make any sense to me. Right? Like it's like that is honestly, it's an entry level job, and you do not need a college degree. Now, if we look at the statistics of college graduates, et cetera, especially in the Black community, that's one hindrance or one exclusionary factor from Black people not being able to be in. Now, for me, whenever I'm building organizations, I try to look at individuals who don't have the conventional sales background or don't have the traditional 4-year degree, et cetera, and people that are eager to learn, that are coachable, et cetera, and just bringing that skill set along the way, because innately we are great sellers.
So let me ask you this. Let's say, for instance, let's go beyond the BDR level for a second,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where I was having this conversation with somebody else the other day who, they have 10 years of selling experience, right? But it's not in tech, it's in something else, right? It's another industry. What are your thoughts around that? Folks not being able to get into tech sales that have been doing other things. What's your thoughts and advice on folks that maybe should be thinking about those people?
My thoughts are hire them at roles higher than entry level BDR type roles. If they have experience in sales but just a different industry, sales skills are transferable. So going from retail into tech is not a big jump. Going from manufacturing to tech is not a big jump. It's just the vocabulary that is needed to be learned in order to be effective, and also how we're making decisions in the sales process. Those are the two things, but those are all teachable. So you can bring someone in at a higher level and have them train, and if you have a good onboarding or training program, then they'll be wildly successful.
Let me ask you this about the growth consultancy, because I feel like a lot of times what happens is that hiring managers at companies, especially companies that I am usually working with, I'll call them, rapidly growing venture-backed tech companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think hiring managers, just by nature, are risk averse to a certain extent, right? And that obviously to de-risk, they want the person who, already has been in the position, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Has proved to it, right? It's kind of like having the number one pick in the draft or something, right? Like as a general manager, you don't want to mess up that pick, right? So you're going to go with the quote unquote sure thing.
Mm-hmm.
As far as what you just said in terms of onboarding and making sure that companies have the right tools, I feel like in a lot of cases they don't.
Yeah.
So when you look at cultured perspective and your go-to market leaders and what they're able to do for companies, talk to me about that and how you might be able to, a cultured perspective, be able to alleviate some of that concern and maybe de-risk that for folks.
Yeah, well, first, when you think about individuals like hiring managers trying to hire the like experience, that shows the level of maturity of the hiring manager. So they're saying right there initially that they aren't confident in their own ability to train and onboard somebody, so they need to bring in someone with more experience.
Right.
So for me, I'm always looking at that, and it's not to say that that's a bad thing. If you need someone more experienced to start that way, but just also have a program that will bring other individuals into the fold. So at Culture Perspective, that's one of the reasons why it was started. So bringing in individuals that don't necessarily have the title of VP of sales or sales manager or whatever the case may be, but they are a BDR, they are an AE, and they've been doing it for 5+ years, et cetera. What I'm doing is giving them an opportunity to become a revenue leader by working on projects with my oversight and other individuals' oversight, to make sure that they aren't going to mess up, if you will, but to go through the motion to get real world experience, hands-on work with tech companies with advisors like myself and others in the background that can kind of coach and guide to make sure that they're on track.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the questions regarding that is, obviously you mentioned folks that are on your team that are at Microsoft and some of the other larger companies. Is there a I mentioned my ideal customer, if you will. Like, who are the companies that you're working with in terms? What's the proxy in terms of size, revenue, stage? Give me a sense of what that typically is.
Typically, Series A and beyond is where we're going with, and that's just from a standpoint that they've raised some money and they are looking to really define their sales process, but don't know where to start. And then we see this quite often where typically your technical founder thinks that they could just like hire people in the sales role to solve the issue, and oftentimes that is like a disaster, a disaster to start. You want to really think about, okay, what is it that we need right now? Is it instead of hiring a revenue leader, maybe we just need meetings set for the CEO. You could hire an SDR who was a lot cheaper than hiring a VP of sales to start with, and still get a lot more traction. Or maybe it's that you need one AE and one SDR to start, and that can get you very, very far before having to put in a revenue leader per se.
How do you figure that out? What are some of the data points, or what experience do you or your team bring to bear to say, okay, let's look at the current state of the way things are right now to figure out who you do need to bring on? Tell me a little bit.
Yeah. So exactly, we're looking at the current state. So we're looking at how many people are in the organization, how many customers do you have, what's the price point, how much of the market do you capture, what are you trying to go after, and then ultimately like what your goals are from quarter to quarter, in order to, and we're seeing how we can help you like put things in place in order to hit those goals. So oftentimes when I think about the go-to-market or the leadership standpoint, I hear this quite often from customers. Marcus, we want you to be our go-to-market leader or our VP of sales or whatever. And when you really start to like look underneath the hood, it's really like, no, you just need an SDR. Like you think you need that because you don't want that responsibility, but you probably just need an SDR or an AE. They'll get you so much further.
Right. So, yeah. And let me ask you, so how do you operationalize it from your seat, I guess, if you will, right? Like, because I look at you, from the outside, and I see all that you're doing, and in particular at Culture Perspective. How are you able to operationalize it in a way where if you have a BDR on your team, or you have, an AE or a sales leader, and they're working within different clients and customers, tell me about your management skill, I guess, that you've developed over the years to make sure that the trains are running on time, the boats are moving, and everybody's rowing in the right direction. At the end of the day, what was asked to be delivered is being delivered. Tell me a little bit about that.
So the first thing that we do is we come up with frameworks even before we have clients in mind. So we'll come up with scenarios and just say, hey, this is a scenario that I had a thought about, or someone else had a thought about, or that came up on some podcast that we listened to. Let's go ahead and map out what success would look like from this thought, even before we even have a customer per se. And the reason why we're doing it is because that's real world training that we're able to get, and we can tweak it on the fly as far as like what's going to land versus what's not. But at least we're getting the brain working in a way that like, okay, we're solving these bottlenecks, etc. The other thing is that I don't want people to overwork themselves. Honestly, in this day and age, being remote most of the time, we have a tendency to keep plowing through day by day. And so I put a limit of number of hours that people can work in a month, and I'm tracking it pretty closely, so that when it does become close to that time, I let them know like, hey, you got to peel back a little bit. You need to take a break or tag someone else in. And the other thing is that we don't work in silos, meaning that it's not just one consultant on a project. It's a team of consultants on a project. And that way, if someone gets busy or, or life happens and things come up, then they can take a step back for a little bit, but there's other people that can fill in that void for them while they're gone.
What tools are you using to manage that? And you mentioned looking at, someone's might be working too many hours and you need to pull back. Like, what are you using for that?
Honestly, it's more of a manual process right now. That's done via, we communicate via Slack quite often, or ClickUp is the project management software that we use. But yeah, like we're definitely open to looking at more ways to use different software to automate the process. But right now it's just a manual check that one of my consultants kind of looks at on a weekly basis and kind of reports back to me.
And as far as the teams go, are there redundancies on the teams, or are there complementary skill sets on the teams, or maybe even both? I guess, like how does that orchestra growth?
Yeah, so it just depends on the client's needs. Like, let's say that they need a outbound strategy to get more leads and more meetings set.
Yeah.
So we'll have a growth development leader, someone that is going to set the strategy.
Mhm.
We're going to have maybe a SDR that can help with making sure that the right type of cadence is happening for the calls. And then we may have someone who is also another growth development leader, just to play to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. So, hey, it looks like we're going down this path, but have we tried these other opportunities as well? So one of the things that our team does very well is that we A/B test our hypothesis out. We don't just say this is the way to go. We look at a couple of ways, avenues in which we're going to work, and then we will double down on the one that rises to the top. That's not to say that we will abandon the one that isn't working out right now. We'll just repurpose it for a different time.
Is there a particular time or a set of data that you look at to say, okay, this is the winner, let's sunset this one, or this is the winner, let's double down our efforts on that? How does that typically play out?
It does depend on the scope of work that we're doing, but if we stick with like lead generation, for instance, or lead generation strategy, then we're tracking things of like, the emails opened, the open rates we're looking at, the response rates we're looking at, how many touches are needed in order to create an opportunity or create a meeting. And then how long is that process from an initial meeting to the time of close? So we're looking at different stages all along the way, and we're always fine tuning that approach to see how we can shorten the sales cycle.
Got it. Let's go back to equity strategy for a moment, which is, I've recently introduced you to a couple of folks that have come to me to help them with their own DEI initiatives. And I know you and I have talked offline, said that you've been busy with that. Tell me, when a company comes to you and they say, Marcus, we need to do something about this, right? We want to improve our equity strategy, our position. We need to find more people from underrepresented communities and whatever. What does that look like? And how do you help them? And then, I guess in the end, are you able to help them with results in a direct way, or is it one of those things where they'll call you, they'll seek your advice, and then they go and do whatever it is they were going to do anyway, just to check that box? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
So the first thing that we do is as soon as someone, whether they mention it or not, that's one of the first things that we lead with in our discovery call, is that we are looking to help make more equitable sales teams from the start. And we can help the organization with that from our network and our connections in order to help fill their pipeline when the time is right. Initially, we can act as their go-to-market a consultancy, their arm, if you will. But when we're starting to see good results, then there's a point when we'll say, hey, you need to start bringing people in-house. One is you can hire from within, from culture perspective. If there's someone that's been doing a great enough job, make them an offer, and there you go. They know the business now, and you can go off and running. The other, though, is that with our community, with Sales for the Culture, Black with No Chaser, us in technology, and a lot of different opportunities, I have access to thousands and thousands of folks that can fill these roles. Now, my thing is that I'm just not going to give over my network to individuals without knowing more about psychological safety in the workplace and their willingness to progress the careers of these individuals if they are successful. So if a company comes to me and says, hey, Marcus, we need to hire more we need to find more Black sellers, I'll say, great, I have thousands of people in my Rolodex. What is your commitment to progressing their career if they have a good year? So meaning if they're in the role 12 months and they are an SDR and they've hit their numbers, et cetera, are you progressing them to an AE or manager or whatever else they want to do? And if the answer is yes, then I can make the introduction. If the answer is no, then I won't make the introduction within my network.
I love that. That's fantastic. Is there any, let's say for instance, the answer is yes. Is there a further conversation to be had in terms of what some of the, metrics are or sort of
Mhm.
milestones, I guess, if you will? Yeah.
Absolutely. And then that's working with Us in Tech, being an advising member of Us in Technology. Kendrick and Dalton do a really good job of just making sure there's ongoing training and support for those individuals that are placed at those companies. So just because you get placed at a tech company, that's just the start. Now there's ongoing training, there is mentorship, there is ways in that which you need to level up your career so that you can get to the next level. So Us in Tech offers a lot of programs around, how do you transition from an SDR to an AE, and then, keep going up the chain. So with those kind of training sessions, and then the individuals that go to those tech companies are in a better position when it's time for them to get promoted.
Tell me more. You said psychological safety. Tell me what you mean by that and how it manifests itself.
Yeah, so I mean, we've over the past, like 2 years or year, 18 months, I don't even know how long it's been now, but we've seen, all the social and injustice in the world, and especially in the United States. And we saw all these tech companies putting up black squares and standing in solidarity with black folks, etc. But there's a lot more that needs to be done there. So just putting up a black square on your LinkedIn profile doesn't really do much for me. What I'm looking for is your commitment and involvement to the Black community. Meaning, are you addressing when issues are happening? That we're seeing of Black people being murdered. Are you addressing that publicly on you or in your organization? Are you addressing that with your Black employees? Are you telling them that they should take time off and that you support them taking time off for that? If we aren't having the conversations in our workplace, then how can I go to work with knowing that like someone that I know just got murdered and still think about KPIs, et cetera? It just doesn't work. Like my brain is elsewhere. So you have to be able to provide a space for individuals to deal with the trauma that they're dealing with on however long it happens.
I think the thing that always gets overlooked a bit in this whole conversation, you just alluded to it here as well, is the inclusion part, where, people start off with, okay, we need to, hire more Black folks. We need to make it a more equitable opportunities, if you will, in terms of moving up within the organization. But the inclusivity seems to get lost a lot, right? Because to your point, they're not necessarily thinking about some of the challenges that Black folks might have when an occasion like that occurs. Are you advising them on that too, like really making sure that, okay, here like Us in Tech as an example, or other resources to say, we can help you if you're uncomfortable with these kinds of conversations. We can help you, sort of, I don't know, guide you or start thinking about how to actually use these. Yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so Us in Tech and Culture Perspective have done that. We're working with a number of tech clients right now regarding equity and belonging programming and what that looks like, starting at the leadership level as well as the the employee level, and kind of meeting in the middle. Because part of this process is that you got to hear from your employees what they want. And so we can't just go out there and just say whatever and like, yeah, we're all inclusive, etc. It's more or less like what are the issues that we need to tackle right away versus and kind of like make a planned approach around that. But yeah, our clients are very much in that mindset. And what I like about our clients that we're working with is that even if they don't know how to do it and they understand that it's uncomfortable and they're being very vulnerable, that they're like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to sound insensitive or what to say. So most of the time I'm just not saying anything. And
Right.
so we'll help in that standpoint, and we'll kind of make it more of a conversation that can happen. So it's like, hey, just what you just said, why don't you tell that to the whole organization? Because honestly, people want to know that you are concerned. You just don't know what to say.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because you can be that sounding board, so to speak, or that, to make sure that, because you're right. I mean, I have conversations offline, just happened last week, with actually the introduction that I made to you. And he's like, hey, I want to run something by you, let me know, am I saying this the right way? Am I thinking about this the right way? So that's very cool. I want to zoom back out a little bit because one of the things that's interesting to me about you when you and I first talked several months ago was just the way that you're able to build teams as an operator, right, from inside. And one of the things I always like to talk about this is vision, strategy, and execution. How do you, Marcus Knight, like attack a big challenge like an initiative? And I'll give you an example. Let's say it's we need to grow sales by 25% next year or something, right? And we need to increase headcount by 50% or something, right? Or this is a new market that we need to go into. When you have these longer term initiatives, right? What's your thought process? How do you first go about thinking about, okay, this is where we need to go. This is how we're going to get there.
Well, the first thing, I turned into a questionmonger like right away and just started asking more and more questions around why. Like why do we need to go this direction? What happens if we miss? I just want to get a more of a framework of understanding of, is it detrimental that if we don't do these things the right way? Number one. From there, I'm then thinking, okay, well, what's the day-to-day things that are needed to be done in order for us to really get there? Because it is a crawl, walk, run process. And so we can't just come out the gate and say, all right, let's just hire all these people without training in place and everything else. So the first thing I start to do whenever I go into any organization is I document my process. Like what am I going through on a day-to-day basis that's making me successful or not? And so the common pitfalls that I'm facing, so that when I do bring people on, they have some framework or benchmark to go off of. So that's the first part, is documentation. And then from there, it's all about, understanding the market itself, like talking to our customer base, talking to our prospects. Like instead of setting up meetings to sell people, I'll just set up meetings just to have conversations with them to understand like what their needs are over the next few years, and how we could potentially fit into that solution. But that will give me a lot more signal that I can then take back to the team to say, okay, we are on the right track or not. And then from there, I look at ways in which to get like low-hanging fruit as far as like sales. So, what partners can I join forces with, from an external standpoint? What ways in which can we, be present, even though we may be a small, mighty team? So are there certain conferences that we need to be attending? Are there certain podcasts that I need to go on in order to help out with that? And then from there, working with my marketing team, working with, the founders, myself, we then are able to start to formulate a process and start to track success, even on a small level to start, before we really get out there and start running or start scaling rapidly.
How do you manage expectations to begin with, right? In other words, you have that number that's out there over the next year or so that I just alluded to. And you start asking questions. Those questions will obviously lead to more, to answers, and you'll start forming your own, thoughts about that. How do you manage expectations so that, because you said you'll start setting meetings, not necessarily to sell but to gather more information, right? And if the mandate is, okay, we need to grow sales by X, right? And you're taking, the first 90 days to learn, and then, okay, well, hold up, we got like 9 more months left. What's going on? So how do you tell me about that? How do you manage expectations from the beginning? What's your advice there?
Yeah. So the first thing I do is I push back on the expectation. Like the first thing, like whatever it is, like, hey, we need to do X. Like especially if they're not in the revenue org, then like that's my responsibility. So therefore I have to really protect how we're going to get there. So just agreeing to whatever is the mandate is won't work, because ultimately I'm setting myself up for failure. So therefore, when we have these mandates or things in mind, the first thing that I'll say is, okay, great, let me go do some research. By the end of the week, let's come back and have a conversation, and I'll give you what the realistic expectation looks like. And so the overall expectations, and I'll just use rough numbers here. Let's say they want to get to 10 million in ARR next year. I'll come back after doing, a few days of research, going to talk to customers and prospects, et cetera, and just more research on the market. I may come back and say, honestly, we can agree to 4 million. We can agree to a smaller number and feel good about that. I am a little bit lowballing in that standpoint. Like I am making sure that like we are under promising, but we will over deliver. And the reason that I'm doing that is because if we just go so fast at that number, every system that we have in place is going to break. And therefore, it's going to be much more catastrophic to get to when that happens at that level than if we were to build the right foundation first.
Oh man, it's like you're talking dirty to me there when you say system break, system break, because that's something that I'll get to in a second. I have to ask this question first of all before I forget. When you talk about low-hanging fruit, right? Our partners you mentioned as an example. Would you say that as you look at the overall go-to market strategy, that could be one, or typically is some of the lowest hanging fruit is partners, just across the board? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I used some kind of channel partner or referral partnership program and most of my time in tech. Like it's been one of the pillars that I've used at some point. It's not necessarily out the gate, but at some point I am going to want to build out that function, or at least tap into people that can help me there. Mm-hmm. So I think so. And honestly, you can get to, if they are good partners and they are committed to giving you so many accounts per month, per quarter, or whatever, you can really offset your revenue targets pretty easily. I mean, just think about it. If you have a partner who's well known in the industry, who can say give you, so many clients a year that are really warm introductions that can turn into deals, and let's say the number is 10 million that we need to get to, I could easily count on the partners to get me to 2. So that I'm already cutting that down, mm-hmm. So there's ways in which you go about it that yes, I think that it is very beneficial to a necessity to scaling the business.
Man, I feel like I could have a whole nother episode just on that alone, because there's so many questions there. But let me ask you this, systems breaking. Mm-hmm. So I'll just use my own experience as an example, right? Like I'm one of those people who wants to run as hard and fast as I possibly can once I see a direction that I want to go in, right? And that I'm certain that this is the direction that I want to go in. And frankly, it's happening right now, just within my own company, the J. David Group, right? But one of the things that is important to me as I think about this and to almost put a governor on myself is to make sure that I have systems in place so that nothing does break, or if it does break, I'm able to repair it quickly and then continue on that path, right, that I was on. When you talk about systems breaking as you're scaling and going hard, what does that look like at because I know what it looks like in my company. What would that look like at your company or any other tech companies that you've been involved in terms of when you're going so hard that it just breaks?
Yeah. So I'll on the sales side, I see this quite often where there's a number that is passed down to the revenue leader or the sales team for the year. Like, hey, we're at 1 million, we need to get to 10 million next year. And so what I see that happens quite often is that people will employ more sales reps. So going from 1 or 2 sales reps to like 10 out the gate. Right there, without having the processes in place, meaning that they don't have the proper documentation of how to work the deal all the way to close. They don't have the proper documentation on lead generation. They don't have the proper documentation on value proposition, etc. But yet they want to just throw more bodies at the issue. Quite often, what happens is that if they're a seed stage company, they'll run out of money very quickly and have to downsize, or even if they're a Series A company, they're just spending way more because when you look at sales folks at that range, they're not an asset yet. So therefore, they'll burn through so much capital just by throwing dollars or throwing bodies at the issue, and it's going to take those sales reps to ramp up. So if those salespeople, and just for simple math, let's say they have 6-figure salaries and it's taking them 3, 6, or 9 months to really ramp up, like, man, you've just wasted, $1 million easily. So for me, how I look at it is why don't you start with something small? And when someone is at bandwidth and can't and are in constraint because they can't take any more meetings, their calendar is overflowing with qualified meetings, or they're having a hard time with follow-up because they have so many new meetings on the books. That's when you start to hire more. That's one example of systems breaking. I can think of so many more, but yeah, I'll stop there.
So interesting. What about, you mentioned the cost of obviously hiring salespeople. Do you look at CAC at all too as well, the customer acquisition cost, and say and how long it actually takes to get that money back over a period of time, to figure all that out in terms of hiring and not hiring? Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, I'm working very closely with marketing in order to understand how much is being spent in order to gain a customer. And then one of the number one priorities that I typically come up with is like, how do we cut that down? Is there a way that we can get more bang for our buck and actually close more deals faster? So and that process isn't like an overnight process, like, oh, yep, we're done, we've solved it. It takes time. We're going to need months of data, months of like trial and error in order to see what's actually going to work best for us. But the initial thing is at least understanding where you're at today, and then just diagnosing or doing a diagnostic of the current sales process and being able to shorten that up a bit.
Tactically, when you're documenting things in the beginning, what does that look like? Like, in other words, are you using just, I don't know, pad and paper? Are you using, Google Docs? Tell me, what does that look like for you?
So it does. I use any and all. Like, I have to have everything. So right now I have the pad of paper right next to me. I have Google Docs open. I have Confluence open. I have my notes from Mac open. Like, I have all these different things. And then what happens is towards either at the end of the day or the start of the day, then I am making sure that I am synthesizing all of my notes and then putting them in a central location.
And that central location for you is what typically?
Depending on which company that it is for, but yeah. Google Docs works great.
Got it. And you mentioned bang for your buck and shortening the length of the sales process and all that. I'm just curious. You got to satisfy the geek in me. Tactically, give me some tactics. What does that look like for you? What have you seen in the past work in terms of maybe shortening the sales process, perhaps maybe even increasing price points? You get in there and you say, well, and by the way, what is the evidence of that? In other words, what can you say, like, oh, these price points aren't where they should be. They should be higher. How do you know that?
A lot of research goes into that. So I'm looking at the market, looking at your competitors, looking at what the interviews that we've done from customers and prospects have said. What are they willing to pay for this pain? There's a number of different things that go into that equation, but those are some of the things that it is. And then ultimately, most of the time, it is that the price does need to be higher. Most of the time, because we're selling ourselves short. But as an early stage company, that's the way that you're just going to, acquiring customers is just a really, important thing. So acquiring as many customers as possible before you make those changes in the price, and also making sure that you're giving ample notice to your customer base, and that pricing will be changing in a quarter or two. You need to be very upfront with them around that. So pricing, so understanding that aspect. And what was the other part of the question?
Let's see, the pricing and I can't remember. Let me just say this. I have another question already though, and we can come back to it if I remember.
Okay.
How often does that cause churn, if you will, and to what percentage? And then also that I guess, and I'm imagining that there's got to be, it's going to occur to a certain extent. What percentage of churn is acceptable there? And also, when you're looking at the conversion rates as it pertains to price point, is there a conversion rate that you say, okay, like this conversion rate is really high? That's probably because the price is too low. Like, what's the balance, I guess, there?
Yeah. So when it comes to churn, I'm always expecting that when we're going to go, when we're looking to increase the price. But but that is a decision that I'm willing to like make, just on the standpoint of like, okay, if we can get, 5 customers that are paying 5x what the normal price was, for instance, then like it's much more worth it for my sales team, from their paychecks, from the business overall, etc. Not to say that we won't put something in place for like a down market client, but for the time being, if I only have limited resources to use to get these deals across the line, then I want to make sure that I'm getting the highest dollar amount that I possibly can before being able to scale and go down market. That's one. And churn for me, like what's going into that factor is the qualified meetings that we're having, how the conversion rate of meetings to close. All of that is going into it, and how long it took, how many meetings needed to happen in order to get that deal across the line. Now when I think about the conversion rate in terms of when to raise the price, I haven't looked at it at a standpoint that like, oh, they're converting at a rapid rate, we need to raise the price. I actually look at it as they're converting at a high rate. Like, let's keep that going for the time being. Like that's giving us great signal that okay, if we can get 1,000, like if we can get 20 customers, great. Now we can get 100 customers pretty quickly, even better. By the end of the year, can we get to 1,000? Doing the same process, and then from there, once you start, but you're also working with the product team to make sure that the product is that sticky, like it's something that is a necessity and not a nice to have. So the trade-off is probably typically when they're converting at a high level and it's an early stage company, that means that it is a little bit underpriced, but that's fine. We're willing to take that on while engineers are building out more features for the product. So I'll make that trade-off until the platform is built the right way.
I would imagine too, as well, when you talk about things breaking and making sure that everything is sustainable, part of that price point or increasing the price point is that you now have the ability to reinvest that into the product or reinvest it into customer success, right? And those types of things, when you talk about making it more sticky, increasing product adoption, you know, all those things are going to be important, right? So it's not just enough to bring it in the front door and then have it go out the back door, or even worse, have an NPS score that's really low because your customers are unhappy and all that stuff, right? So all that has to be, you have to think about that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's always something that we're thinking about. And also some of the companies that I advise for, I ask them to start to think of creating a customer advisory board at different stages. So they're getting insight into what their customers want to see very early on, and it will evolve. So
yes. Sounded a little bit like Arsenio Hall there when I said yes. I didn't want to drag it out though too much. So let me ask you this: kid culture. Tell me about that. I'm curious.
Yeah. So Kid Culture is a clothing line, and all gender kids wear clothing line. Who started by my son, who's 5 years old, and two other kids, nephew Kenzo and a good friend Tegan. So the ages are 4, 5, and 7 of these kids, and they're owners of this company, right? The whole point is that we wanted to build something that was to teach our kids about generational wealth, teach them about creativity and freedom of expression, and also do it in a stylish way. Like, we know so many parents were reaching out to me to like style their kids because they saw the way that my kid was dressed, and I'm like, I don't have that type of time, but I can at least put together a clothing line, and you can do something with that, buy the clothes that he's wearing. And so we opened up a showroom in Chicago this year in West Loop. And we're looking to expand another showroom here in Seattle sometime in the new year. But ultimately, it's just one of these things that it's just about letting kids be creative and express themselves and make comfortable, affordable, eco-friendly clothing.
I love that, man. That is phenomenal. So how do you? Because I'm passionate about obviously just raising kids, as anybody I guess would be that's a parent. But when it comes to the way that you communicate what you just said to your kid, right? How intentional are you about showing them that they should be comfortable with expressing themselves and, being comfortable with their own skin and creativity. Like what does that look like at home for Marcus Knight?
Oh my goodness. So my son Langston is he's way more of an artist than I ever will be. So he can draw better than me at 5 years old, all these things. But basically we are, we're doing, the learning aspect of everything. So from numbers, letters, words and fractions, all that good stuff. But then the other thing that we try to focus on is we dedicate time into the artistic expression that he wants. So whether that's drama, whether that's painting and drawing, etc., and it's something that like he knows that he wants to be when he grows up. So we are allocating time daily for him to do these activities, and then also how does that transfer back into kid culture? So what he ends up doing is he's having conversations like when the parents have meetings around how to take the business forward, the kids are right there on the meetings and they're sitting there understanding, like maybe not fully understanding, but they're listening to the conversation and why it's important. We're getting input from the kids as far as like what colors they like, what kind of designs and graphics. Some of the kids are like Kenzo is making some of the designs and graphics that are going on the shirts. Like it's just one of those things that we're like, we just need to lead in this area. If you allow kids to be their full selves, they will show up. They will definitely show up.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So, and when you say you make time every day, how would you define that time? In other words, is it structured? Is it unstructured? Is it a combination of the two? What does that look like in terms of the whole artistic creativity there and structure?
Yeah, so we started out very unstructured. It was just like, hey, what are you interested in? Let's just do that. And my wife is way better at that than me. But so now we have both. We have some unstructured days and then some structured days. I'd say they probably have about 3 structured days and the rest of the time is unstructured. Right. And that can be the other 4 days out of the week. Like all I require is that there's 3 days out of the week that we do something along these lines. But Langston likes to do things every single day. So as soon as they get home from school, get some learning done from his teacher, and then we go right into artistic stuff.
Oh man, I love that. That is so energizing to hear. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, now we are going to do what I've been calling the rapid, what do I call it? The final 5. I used to call it the rapid 5. The rapid 5. The only problem with the rapid 5 is that sometimes it ended up being not so rapid. So I'm just calling it the final 5. And the reason why it has not been so rapid is sometimes it's me where, you'll answer the question and then sometimes, I just want to hang on and follow up whatever it is that you just said. That's number one. And sometimes, if you're not necessarily expecting the question, it takes some thought. So anyways, we're calling it the final 5. So you ready for those?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Do you have a philosophy or general approach to how you prioritize your time?
Wow. How to prioritize my time. So one, I do time blocks on my calendar every day. Okay. And typically the mornings, I try to get up before everybody else and get a little bit of alone time and just like meditation in order to like really kind of structure my day. That can be done. Let me caveat this. That can either be done in the morning, but sometimes I do it at night as well. But like when everyone else is like asleep and everything else. So I have some time in there to do that. But overall, I structure time blocks in my day in order to be able to get through all of my pressing tasks. And me, I've mentioned all the different ways in which I'm documenting, but I have my to-do list every single day, and it's on Google Docs. It's written down, and I am seriously like hour by hour checking off what I'm doing, what I've completed, if you will. Some things will get pushed the next day, just depending on the priority of what comes my way. But overall, that's the time blocking is the main important thing for me.
How early do you wake up? That's not quite one of the 5, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. Anywhere between 5:30 and 6:30.
Okay. Tell me about a setback and how you've overcome it.
Setback and how I've overcome it. In what sense? Just in any
Yeah, it could be personal, could be professional, could be short term, could be long term. See, that's why it's not rapid anymore.
I see. Because like, yeah, okay. A setback and how I overcame it. Let's see. Oh yeah, I guess culture perspective. Like starting out for the first 9 months, I was the sole consultant for the company,
Mhm.
and I realized that I was the bottleneck, right? Like I only had so much time in a day. I only had so many things that I could get done, and so I actually ended up taking the holiday season. Well, from December, the first part of December all the way through February off of working my consultancy. And the reason why I did that is because I didn't have time to even think about like how to scale this. I was just doing. So once I took that time off and really just focused on where do I want to see this company go and how what is needed to get there, the short answer was help, right? Like I needed help, right? So then I was able to put out the ask on Sales for the Culture of like, hey, I'm looking to build this consultancy. I need, probably about 5 people. I had an alarming amount of individuals who stepped up that were like interested in working for Culture Perspective and helping build this. So much so that I just took 14 and probably can take another 14 tomorrow if I wanted to. So yeah, so that now we're at a point that we scaled the business. I am no longer part of the day to day. So I'm just overseeing I'm just giving insight into like how to effectively communicate and get things done.
Sounds like we were on parallel tracks there for a while. I realized earlier this year that I was the bottleneck too, and have been for a while. And that 4-letter word help, man, it's changed things in my life. I swear, it's amazing. Which is why I'm running
Yes,
even faster now, because I feel like I'm in just more of my essence.
exactly. That hence why I can start more companies is because I've been able to, I've been
Yes.
able to clear up that bottleneck.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. I don't know why it took me so long. I don't know why. All right, here's one that dovetails into that one. How do you manage stress or prevent it from overcoming you?
I'd say this is an ongoing battle with me. Like I've had that moment that I took back in December. I mentioned that was when I was at the peak of like my anxiety and stress, and so I just knew that I physically couldn't do anymore. I just had to get offline for a while. Now I am very cognizant of my stress levels, and I tend to find time and every day to just get time to myself during the workday. And I'm not saying like before and after. During the workday is when I'm doing this. So typically that could be I have an alarm bell go off and just say, hey, go walk around the block. Like just go take a walk around the block. No, don't take your phone with you. Don't take anything else with you. Just get out and get some fresh air. The other thing is just like letting people know when I'm feeling anxiety. So letting my teams know, like, hey, I got a lot going on right now. I may be slow to respond. Can y'all pick up the slack for me right now? And when I put things out there like that, people are very receptive and they will help out in a heartbeat. But the thing is that I wasn't raised that way, so it's not like something that I'm used to doing. So I'm just it's a growing lesson for me.
I want to read something that's in very real time today, right? So I
Okay.
sent this in anticipation of this podcast. Okay. I sent this to my team at 12:13. I need a brain break to make sure my concentration and energy are fully optimized for my 2 o'clock podcast interview. I will be dark until after 3. Anything urgent, please let Kerry know.
Yo, that's what's up. That's what I'm talking about. That's
Right.
exactly what I'm talking about. Yes.
Yep, that's exactly what I did. I shut off my phone. So when you had called, now
Yeah.
it was off, right?
Yeah. Oh, I know. I was like, dang, his phone is off. Okay, good for him. Good for him.
See, now you know, right?
Yes. I love it.
What do you want to get better at right now?
Um, let's see. What do I want to get better at right now? Um, that's a good question. I would say I honestly don't know. I don't know. Right now, what I could get, I mean, I do way too much. So
Mhm.
maybe just controlling my time a little bit more. Like I do a pretty decent job at it right now, but
Mhm.
I can always improve. There's every business, everything that I'm doing requires a certain amount of attention, and there's only so much time within a day to get things done. And so just being able to really streamline my time more efficiently is what I'm focusing on. So when you mentioned something earlier about what process software or something like that I was using,
Yep.
finding more ways to automate whatever I'm doing is a great way.
Yep. I'm curious, by the way. I'm going to look up Confluence. I haven't heard of it, but I'm always looking for
Oh,
ways to.
Atlassian. Unless
that's okay. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Last question. What are you most excited about right now, both personally and professionally?
Man, so personally, working with us in technology and getting so many underrepresented talent like into software sales has been just a highlight of mine. Like, I am very passionate about this, and I mean, we're placing people at a rapid rate in companies, and so that's been really exciting. The other thing that's been exciting has been the kid culture. Like, that came out of nowhere, and basically when I see like issues, then like I try to help to do what I can to solve them or put things in place to solve them. So for instance, friends were unemployed, were laid off during COVID. So I was like, hey, I had this idea in the back of my head. Can y'all run with it and start it? So I'm excited to see where kid culture goes in the next year or two. And then professionally, just now being in the supply chain space, learning more about this industry and seeing how we're able to help organizations solve their supply chain issues. I mean, Shipium is just such a cool product where we're able to bring that Amazon Prime-like experience to every retail brand out there. I think that's like a big deal, and we're getting a lot of early traction regarding companies wanting to partner with us. So
that is fantastic. Where can folks reach you to say thank you for doing this, follow up, perhaps maybe be part of Cultured Perspective or anything else?
Yeah, so Marcus at culturedperspective.com is my email address. I'm on LinkedIn, Marcus Knight. I'm on Instagram, Mr. Knight83. And yeah, also Black with No Chaser, like on Instagram. So I see all of those messages as well. So feel free to reach out however you like. And I will say, allow me about a week to respond, but I will respond.
You heard it here first, everybody. Marcus, I appreciate you blocking off this particular hour to go over quota with me.
Appreciate you, Jay. This has been a pleasure.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Cue the music.